That's how we succeed. We see the fear, we experience it, we feel it, we live it, and we go anyway. As cliche as that sounds, we do it. And the reason we don't do it is because it's uncomfortable. But discomfort, my friends, is that space where the growth happens. So lean into that discomfort because there's fulfillment on the other side of it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Flow Over Fear and our 100th anniversary episode that is airing a few episodes after episode 100. Yeah, that's right. We celebrated our 100th episode with Danny Bader. We dropped not long ago. And I know I just said this is our 100th anniversary, which makes it sound like this show is 100 years old. But it's really not. It's 100 episodes old. And that is a great milestone for us. And I wanted to celebrate in this episode and kind of celebrate it in epic fashion in the way that they celebrated in the old sitcoms of the 1980s. I mean, do you remember when on Family Ties, when the Keatons would all sit around the couch and there'd be a thunderstorm or something outside? They'd be like, well, I guess we're not going outside tonight. So we better just sit inside and reminisce on everything that's happened on this show. Do you remember when? And then they, of course, remembered some incident where Alex was at the Republican National Convention and he got embarrassed in some way. Anyway, I digress. But that's what we're going to do on this episode. We're going to remember back on 100 great episodes. I want to share some of the lessons, some of the important themes that have come across and lessons learned from these last 100 episodes, because, you know, it might as well have been 100 years worth of value that we've dropped here. We've had incredible guests. And, you know, I just want to share a little bit about what this experience has been like for me, because actually making it to 100 episodes, I have heard within the podcast universe is not something that often happens. A lot of people stop doing it, you know, after a few episodes. And I can understand why. The process of just starting a podcast is challenging. I mean, you have to get over a lot of limitations, a lot of limiting beliefs. And certainly I had some of those. And the process of continuing to keep on and believe yourself viable or relevant is also a challenge in and of itself. But the amount of support that I've gotten, especially recently, as we've gained traction on this show, has been incredible. In those early episodes, it is a bit like a desert where you start the show. Not a lot of people listen, of course, friends and family, and you have to kind of survive those desert and dry days until you get to a point where you start to get traction and it starts to feel good. And a few people start to listen and it just feels great. And I'll just say that, you know, when I posted about the fact that we hit 100 episodes, the amount of support and encouragement that I received and that many of my guests have received has been incredible. The fact that, that people are getting so much from this show, where I have an opportunity just to share a bit about my experience with fear, and where I get to be curious about other people's experiences and how they rise above it. It makes me feel so good. It makes me feel like this is the contributing thing. And it wasn't always like that, because about a year ago, when I was thinking about starting this podcast and sharing this message, all of those self-doubting beliefs came flooding in. And this is relevant to the nature of this very show. All of those fears. I had that moment of excitement. I had those moments of excitement where it's like, wouldn't it be cool to share a message on a podcast and to do something that I love and interview great people? Yeah, that'd be great. But here's the fear. The fear is going to pop up and say, you know what? You don't have a message worth giving. You're not going to be able to get people to interview. Who's going to want to be on your show? You can't even ask great questions. You stumble over your words and you're trying to be a speaker. Are you kidding me? Flow over fear, that name, that sounds ridiculous and it won't gain any traction whatsoever. And so those were the limiting beliefs. I thought that I would hate it. I thought that I would start the show and I would immediately get overwhelmed or get freaked out or have panic attacks because of the people I had to interview. It was scary. I was legitimately afraid. And there are these moments though where thank goodness that I've had the points of reference that I have in my life, where I've had situations where I have experienced that fear, that self-doubt, that all of that stuff. And I've said, no, I'm not going to do that thing because it's too scary or I can't do it or my brain's telling me I can't or somebody else is telling me I can't. Thank goodness I have those points of reference because I also have points of reference where I've had that experience and I've embraced the fear, which is the theme of this show. And where I have taken that option and I've succeeded. And every time I have, I come out on the other side fulfilled and excited and overjoyed by the fact that, I pursued the thing. So here I am in July or, last July or last whenever it was, thinking about starting this show that ended up dropping its first episode in November. Thinking to myself, all of these fears, but super excited about this message I wanted to share. And I realized, well, if you're delivering this message of trying to find flow over fear, then, this is probably the ripe opportunity to do just that. And so even though I was scared to do it, I did it anyway. I thought I would hate it. And about a week into it, I fell in love. I fell in love with this platform and this show and this idea and the people that I was interviewing. It's like the greatest life hack ever. And I hate using the term life hack because it's like, oh, everything's a life hack. But in this term, in this way, it's like the greatest cheat code ever. You put your name out there on a show, you want to deliver a message that will help people. And the most amazing people come forward to step up to that challenge and share themselves vulnerably. Vulnerably. I think is that enough syllables? I think I got it right. But they share of themselves authentically. And I've had the chance over these last 100 episodes to interview a number of amazing people with amazing stories that have inspired me and helped me to grow and helped me to lean into fear in other ways in my life and see that gift that's in fear. Because that's right. Fear is a gift. And if you hate me for saying that, that's probably a good thing. That probably means that you're being presented that gift right now. Where are you seeing that gift of fear in your life? We're right on the other side of that fear is the most abundant life you can ever dream of. It's so fast forward to this 100th episode. This is the absolute joy of my life to be able to talk on this medium and to share this message and to share how I'm experiencing fear in my life, how I'm experiencing flow, and where the challenges are, what the successes are, and share of other people in that too, and have those authentic conversations. One of the things I was also afraid of in interviewing other people, I thought that, for those of us kind of living with this anxiety or this irrational fear, we have this tendency to believe, especially when we're people pleasers, that the second we start asking questions is the second that our guests are going to somehow become divas and start saying, I would never answer such a question. That is crazy. This is the worst interview ever. I'm out of here. And they take off their lapel mic and they throw it down and they walk out. Well, that has never happened. And in fact, I've had a lot of great feedback on the conversations we have because I'm always afraid. The other fear that I have is when I sit down to interview someone that I'm not going to be prepared enough, or I don't have the questions right, or anything like that. Or I'm going to run out of things to say, or I'm going to look like Chris Farley in Saturday Night Live, when he's interviewing Paul McCartney, if you've ever seen that Saturday Night Live episode, and just say something like, "You remember when you did We're in Birds? That was so awesome." That's how it sound. But again, it's just the conversations flowed, and it's a topic that I think that became really spiritual in the nature of how these conversations did flow. So I know I'm rambling a lot about what my fears were when I started this, and how I walked through those. But I think that's important to share as I walk into the three things that I want to share, those three important lessons that I've learned from these 100 episodes and the themes that have come out of them, is that fear doesn't go away. In fact, it continues to be a signal, not just for danger. Of course, we know the signal for danger, but when we have those moments of oh shit, that's a signal that maybe we have an opportunity to pursue something great. So that this person that didn't have the microphone last year, that didn't have the really cool graphic behind me, or the really cool wall art behind me, or the headphones, or the 100 episodes under my belt, that person a year ago who had these fears of the unknown, of the uncertainty, of picturing myself maybe 10 episodes in and giving up because I wasn't getting any listenership, to where I am today, just because I stayed consistent and continued on with it and continued to pursue it. That's how we succeed. We see the fear, we experience it, we feel it, we live it, and we go anyway. As cliche as that sounds, we do it. And the reason we don't do it is because it's uncomfortable. But discomfort, my friends, is that space where the growth happens. So lean into that discomfort, because there's fulfillment on the other side of it. And I'll say that it's not easy even once you get started, even once you take that first step beyond fear, because then you're in the desert. And the desert, can last for a while. The desert here in this show lasted for a while, for many episodes before it gained traction. And, we started out with, a few episodes or a few listens or downloads at a time, and not looking at the data until we get to a point today where we're nearing 1,000 downloads a month, and that is a great milestone as we move to our next milestone, to help 1 million people, to have 1 million listeners on this show. Wouldn't that be great? And so there's always a desert that we have to go through, and we have to just continue walking through it to get to the other side of it. And so eventually we can make it through with consistency and with this discipline and the right adjustments of what needs to work and the right level of feedback. So I want to very personally and very deeply thank everybody who's listening right now and who has taken the time to listen to the show and who has gotten something from it, who has shared it with a friend, who has taken the time to give it a 5-star review and subscribe to it. It has made all the difference in terms of how we know what is resonating most with our listeners and how best to serve you all. And if there's anything we can do, any message you want us to share, any guests you want to see, any topics you want me to cover, please share them. And I would love to know how we can continue to make this show better into the next 100 episodes and beyond. We have some great guests lined up over the next few months. It's going to be incredible. The caliber of this show is only improving, and it will continue to improve into the next many, many episodes. So please keep tuning in. And I'd like to share, thinking of these last episodes, I'd also really like to thank every guest who took a chance on the show. We've had, so many wonderful guests thus far. In fact, we've had about, of those 100 episodes, about a third of them have been interviews of great people. So, that's what I want to talk about today. I want to take the nuggets of wisdom and condense them down into some of the key takeaways, the larger scale takeaways that have come from those episodes. Because every one of my guests has shared their personal experiences deeply and vulnerably with their experiences with fear, where they've walked through it, where they felt hopeless, where they felt like there's no end in sight, where they've been walking through the desert. And then they share about how they come out the other side, the lessons they've learned, what their perspective on fear is, and how they've turned it into a triumph, and how you can too. That's been the power of this show. And one of the first and most important themes that has come up many times in this show has been how in the process of healing and growth, in both healing and growth, community is one of the most vital parts of that. Community is one of the most vital parts of healing and growth. Who we surround ourselves with is one of the most powerful ways in which we can find healing, and we can rise out of our fear, and how we can rise above it and actually move on to serve the best purpose that we have in the world. That community for me was Alcoholics Anonymous when I came out of addiction. For many of the people in this group, that community has been those communities have been different. That's the thing. There's communities for everything, and it's important to find those communities. As I came out of AA, it became new communities of triathlon to help me to grow into that experience. Communities with regard to building a brand, with regard to building a business, with regard to anything, with regard to contributing more in our lives. What are the communities you're leaning into? I remember one of the early episodes was with Jamie Gruber, who runs the show Tribe of Millionaires and is a fellow member of GoBundance, which is a community that I'm a part of. And Jamie, really references the importance of community in that episode, as do many others. And one of those key themes is that when we're looking for that community, we have to look for a few things that we need. We have the people in that community have to have what we want or be working toward what we want. B, they have to be willing to give it away. C, there has to be an element of mentorship or ways to learn or ways to lean into that mentorship. And D, there has to be a way for you to contribute to that community. With those four elements in place, community can be a powerful tool in not just healing, but personal growth. I remember, I know that this is one of those big aspects of rising above fear, is entering into those communities, because this is a lot of times where that fear comes into play. We are naturally embarrassed as beginners or when we're new to something. If you want to start a podcast, the initial response is embarrassment. If you want to enter in a community of podcasters who are already very successful, because your brain's going to tell you, hey, those people are going to tell me that I am not worth much, that I shouldn't be here, and that blah, blah, blah. And they very well may, and that may be the wrong community. But here's the thing: in the right community, the reason that is embarrassing is because we're trying to protect ourselves. But in the right community, those resources will hold out their hands and help to grow. I found that within Brand Builders Group, which is a group that has helped me to build our brand. It helped me to grow this podcast organically in the way that I have. It's been a great resource for me, Brand Builders Group, and as has GoBundance, as have the many other communities I've been a part of. So finding those communities is probably the first and foremost way you should look at building that group. It's that first level of leaning into the fear and saying, all right, I'm embarrassed. I'm afraid to jump into this community, or I'm afraid of feeling shame or rejection or what have you. And that is the first step beyond fear. That is the first level of discomfort that you need to feel to get to the next level, which is where you want to go to. And then those levels only increase because you look above you and there's always some new opportunity that presents itself that you can strive toward. Community. Find that community. Now, the second theme that has come up within this show over the last 100 episodes and lessons learned is that there is hope beyond hopelessness. This was a lesson that was learned, that not only in my own personal story of, sitting in a jail cell, thinking that my life was over, thinking that I had nothing left to live for. And then, as I healed, as I went through recovery, as I found triathlon, as I pursued more things, I found that the hope was the driving force that made that worthwhile and helped me succeed. But it was also a lesson learned in our first 2 episodes of this show with Eric Beach and Mike Ergo, both military veterans, both individuals who went through incredible trauma within their military career, saw hell and experienced hell even when they came back, through PTSD, but were able to recover and find that hope and to find that healing. And it's an important message to remember because a lot of times we get ourselves into that space, and it might not be because of war, but here's the thing. We all feel trauma in different ways. We all feel those negative experiences in our own ways. And the trauma of just experiencing certain elements of life can be as debilitating as the trauma of seeing horrific things in war. We all experience it differently, and there's no need to compare it, only to experience it. But even in that hopelessness that we feel, and I've been there, there's hope beyond it. There are miracles beyond that hopelessness. And this is something I want to shout from the rooftops to people who may be suffering. Instead of leaning into that hopelessness and wandering there, find those communities of support. Get that help that is always out there for in every area that you're in. Lean into that fear of the embarrassment, rejection, shame, or whatever that you might be afraid of feeling. To lean into those communities so that you can find the hope beyond the hopelessness. That is the ticket. That is the doorway out of suffering. It's to unlock that door of healing first. There are 3 evolutions of how we experience fear. And I provide more context to this in my speaking in when I speak from the stage, that first we fight it. That's where we suffer. We fight against it by leaning into our addictions, our traumas, our behaviors, all of that stuff. That's where we're fighting against fear. And when we're fighting against fear, we're always losing an unwinnable war because we can't win against fear. It's a feeling that we've all felt, and it has a multi-million year head start on us. Through evolutionary times, we felt fear, and that fear has existed for a purpose, to tell us that these are either danger or opportunity. And so we have the opportunity to actually see it as a signal for either one. But when we're fighting against it, we fail to see. We're blinded to what that purpose actually is. And instead, we numb ourselves with our addictions or our behaviors or whatever it might be. But then you rise up to face your fear. That's where healing happens. And healing isn't an act or facing your fear isn't an act of defiance or fighting against it. It's an act of acceptance, accepting fear as part of the life that we live. And that is the path to healing, is that first acceptance of it, finding those communities and getting that support. Then finally, once you have faced it, once you have gone through the healing process, you can rise up and embrace it. And when you embrace fear, you can see it as a signal for an opportunity to grow. You could see those signals in your life, those times in your life where you see where you see the signs or the things that tell you what you want or what you want to pursue, and they trigger that oh shit moment in you. And you can begin to say, okay, that's my signal to lean into that fear a little bit more and maybe pursue it. That's how you embrace fear. That's how you go from fighting fear to facing fear to finally embracing fear. There's hope beyond that hopelessness when we're fighting fear. And it means that we should rise up to face our fears first, then embrace our fears. Finally, the final theme that I want to share with you that has come from the first 300 episodes of this show has been that the very best things in life are all on the other side of fear. And this may sound cliche. You may hear it all the time, but you need to hear it again. And we've heard it as a theme over and over and over and over again within the context of this show, from episode 1 to episode 100, that the very best things are on the other side of fear. So here's the theme of every episode that I've ever recorded on the interview. Guest experiences a significant trial or crucible or experience of challenge. Guest goes through it. Guest leans into it in some way, or guest struggles through it in some way. Guest discovers an aha moment where they rise above it. Guest discovers a secret formula for success. Guest puts that into their own life. Guest experiences that. Guest has some powerful lesson to provide the world. That's the theme of it. What is that challenge? What is that struggle that you're going through right now, where you're fighting against it? And what is that next step just beyond that other side of fear? You don't need to take a massive leap beyond that fear. No massive swan dives here. No cannonballs, okay? What we're talking about is just a small step into that fear. Just nudge it along. When we're feeling that fear, a lot of times where that signal for opportunity exists means that we're just pushing up against the edge of our comfort zone. I mean, if you think of yourself living in this bubble of your reality, or this bubble, the difference is that this bubble is elastic and it can grow outward. But if we're on that bubble of our reality and we get up to the edge and we can see out there, it becomes a little scary because that's where the unknown occurs. So if we just push a little bit further, it expands it. It expands our capacity, expands our growth. And when we rise into those fears and we think to ourselves, oh, you know what? Hey, on the other side of that thing that was wildly uncomfortable, I found this amazing fulfillment and joy. I found that here. And I can do that again. It becomes a point of reference for new ones, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. That's why the idea that we can if we lean into the discomfort now, we are able to offset the long-term discomfort. If we're giving into the discomfort, if we're striving for comfort now, to lean into comfort now, we're actually making ourselves wildly uncomfortable over the long term. So, but if we are actually expanding that comfort zone now and leaning into that discomfort a bit now, we are creating a life of fulfillment and resilience that allows us to embrace a lot of those things. For me, I've been able to reframe my relationship with fear a lot since I struggled and I fought against it. But I still experience fear today. I still experience anxiety. Even today, I've had a very busy week and it's been, very anxious for me. But the beautiful thing is that I can learn to have a relationship with it, to interact with it, to understand what it's telling me. Maybe it's telling me that I need to calm down a bit and maybe cancel some of my appointments so that I can take the time for myself to rest. That may be one thing it's telling me. Another thing it may be telling me is that, hey, you know what? This opportunity that's in front of you that's scaring you a little bit, maybe you should look into that a little bit more. Maybe you should make the phone call. Maybe you should have the uncomfortable conversation. And you know what? As Danny Bader said in episode 100, everything's going to be all right. And that's the beautiful message of finding that hope beyond the hopelessness, is just knowing that even amidst all of that stuff, that everything's going to be all right. And the very best things in life are on the other side of fear. If we have that faith and we just lean beyond it a little bit, those are the key, I think, some of the really important themes that have come up a lot in these episodes. There's been a lot of lessons. Don't get me wrong. And I would suggest if you haven't been listening for very long, go back and listen to some of the gold nuggets of the earlier episodes and even some of the more recent ones, because there is a lot of knowledge dropped by some amazing people. I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of personal development coaching and everything have been in these shows. You won't be sorry that you did. And also, I'll just say that these three themes are the ones that have been the most powerful, in my opinion, and the most common. Community is the source of healing and the source of personal growth and development. That there is hope beyond the hopelessness. That we don't need to stay in that world of hopelessness that it feels like, but there are miracles that exist on the other side of it. And you could take my word for it, and all of the guests that I've had on this show. And then finally, that the best things in life are truly on the other side of fear. If you just take that step beyond whatever is scaring you right now, you might just find ultimate fulfillment. Thank you for joining me in the last 100 episodes of Flow Over Fear. I look forward to sharing the next 100 episodes with you. We got some great things coming, and we will see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.